Welcome to the Party Lines, where we look at the big issues, some political, some not political, and address them from both sides of the aisle. When politicians say they're putting Canada first, it sounds reassuring, but is that policy or just messaging? Take a look at the Prime Minister's recent comments.
What do you think rupture means? Rupture means that things aren't normal. Nostalgia is not a strategy. Things have changed. Things have changed fundamentally. We get that. We understand that. That's why we get up in the morning. What do we think about when we get up in the morning? We think about affordability for Canadians, how we can make life more affordable, and how we can build this country strong, more independent, more prosperous, fairer for all. That's what we get. And our negotiations with the United States and how we diversify our partnerships elsewhere. We don't get up first thing in the morning. I do not get up first thing in the morning and think about the United States. Okay? I think about Canadians. That's the difference. We have more than enough to do in this country. We're building this place strong. There is a misimpression by some of the degree to which we are reliant on the United States. Okay? Yes, it is our biggest trading partner by far. We are also their second biggest trading partner. There is a symbiosis between the two. There's a reason why 85% of our trade is tariff-free still, and that's maintained. Our destiny is first and foremost going to be determined by what we do here, how we build here. Canadians get that. Canadians get that. I'm not sure everyone south of the border understands that to the extent it is true.
So he went from saying he doesn't think about the U.S. to saying how important they are in the relationship we have. So that speech to me was trying to follow it. It was like following the bouncing ball.
I like that he's actually being a little bit tougher and pushing back now. I think that the point is his focus primarily is on Canada first. So yes, it's important to have these trade negotiations, but that's why he's not only waiting on them. Like, he's making sure that he's doing the trips, he's getting the other sovereign powers to come along with us. Like, if you want to say middle ground or middle powers, but I think it's just so much more than an annoyance because of what we're seeing with like Howard Lutnick's comments or being pressed that way, that at this presser, finally, he's pushing back a bit more to say, listen, like, they're creating this and we're just dealing with it as a result.
Sure, but I mean, the fact that you said you wake up and don't think about the U.S.,
putting Canadians,
you should think of it first thing, the importance that we have,
right?
And the day-to-day relationships that we seem to be, we never used to talk about the... Yes, normal situation, you're not waking up and thinking of the U.S. every day because everything's stable, but it's not. So you better be waking up and thinking about it. Putting Canadians first. I hope every government's always put Canadians first. I mean, we're here for it. And we don't just rely on the U.S., but our big brother pretty much does a lot of things with us. So the fact that he said that and then he kind of countered and walked it back and said, yeah, but we rely on each other and we're symbiotic. So we're not symbiotic right now, though.
No.
We really aren't.
And I think that's why it's so important that he's being honest. He's saying to Canadians, this is the kind of things that we have to do to fortify. Like, we have to continue being Canada strong. We have to continue having different levers economically that we can pull on. So yes, that's never going to go away. That geographically, that's where we're right beside. And yes, we have to do trade in some way, shape, or form. But he's also saying, for them to pigeonholed the fact that we're not selling their booze on our shelves. Well, the bigger problem is they've broken their CUSMA agreement with us. Like, there shouldn't be these issues with lumber or steel or any of these things that are impacting us.
The booze is a sexy thing. I mean, it's alcohol. It's easy to talk about. It's easier than, it affects more people than when you think aluminum does, but people don't talk about aluminum every day. I just think from the standpoint, we need the levers, we need to, diversify our economy and what we're trading with, et cetera. But realistically, geography does matter. It always has mattered. And our relationship with them is, we need to be saving what we're doing now as well as looking at other options. But I really felt like in that speech, he talked around what he was really saying. He basically discounted the U.S. and then came back to them. But I understand, we can't focus all our attention on the U.S. We have to mitigate that relationship and we need to look elsewhere. But the fact that he came up and said, we're Canada first and we're not thinking about the States every morning, that's terrifying. If someone on his team better be.
And I think they are because of what we're seeing and how he's just acquired so many different people like Lisa Rett, or he's got, Aaron O'Toole or Jean, people from the bloc, right? Yeah. So I think at the same time, his actions are going to speak louder than some of these words, right? So, but all jokes aside, when we look at this next story, the applause, the politics went silent. We'll discuss the chaos surrounding the correspondents' dinner in Washington and what happened when we return.
I say no on the party line, so let's go.
It was Washington's biggest media night, but the relationship between power and the press was canceled by more political violence in the U.S. Let's take a look.
This was an event dedicated to freedom of speech that was supposed to bring together members of both parties with members of the press. And in a certain way, it did, because the fact that they just unified, I saw a room that was just totally unified. It was in one way very beautiful, a very beautiful thing to see. A man charged a security checkpoint armed with multiple weapons, and he was taken down by some very brave members of Secret Service, and they acted very quickly and have just released, for purposes of transparency, clarity. I've ordered it to be put out. You probably have it by now, put out on Truth and put out on many other platforms. A tape showing the violence of this thug that attacked our Constitution, and also showing how quickly Secret Service and law enforcement acted on our country's behalf. Really did a great job. One officer was shot, but saved by the fact that he was wearing obviously a very good bulletproof vest. He was shot from very close distance with a very powerful gun.
No one saw this one coming. I mean, this was a shocking one considering the magnitude of this event, and he had attended before. All eyes were on the event, so the fact it was attempted here, whether it was on the president's life or his cabinet or wherever, we really don't know as of yet. And maybe we won't know. There's things that are trickling out, but interesting that it happened at this event.
I think now it's unprecedented how many times the assassination attempts have been on this particular president, and that they were even going to host something like this. I think it was almost scary how much it was foreboded, because his press secretary actually in her speech said, oh, the president's going to have shots fired in his speech. So now we see the conspiracy theorists doing their job on the internet saying, was this staged? Like political violence, things like this, it's just showing how crazy it's getting out of hand, how now all of a sudden you can't even attend different events. And I almost think that it was more in poor taste that he took to social media to say this is why he needs his ballroom built to fortify.
You can't go taste with Trump as
right?
Point, right?
Like it just those.
That
was
that was a point that did come up. I thought was interesting, saying you can control it a little bit better as far as the security goes. But I mean, it's a ball. Like this is not the first time someone's had an event at this facility or hotel before, right?
It's large. It's very large.
It's large.
Yeah.
And interesting from how we've evolved in this show is this is actually the second attempt since we conceptualized and brought this show to TV on his life. Like we have not been around a long time, and this is number 2. I had a friend message me yesterday, said, interesting, this is a third attempt. Obama was publicly out there for 8 years with nothing on him.
Right.
And I thought, wow, is that a sign of what's going on towards Trump, or is that a sign of the times?
Right. And I feel like with his mega base, a lot of those people are so gun loving, like people that it's just something like this with their First Amendment right that they want to say that they have the right to arms. But then we see something like this again and again. And why not come out against some
it's Democratic folks who are shooting at him, though, which is ironic.
Right.
From the standpoint, it isn't his base who's coming after him. It's them.
Yeah, none of it makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, even I had a greater conversation yesterday saying, there's a lot of people in this room and a lot of high profile people. What is their policy? And you use that designated survivor who wasn't in the room. So if you think about, world politics right now, unfortunately, we talk a lot about nuclear weapons, etc. What if, you had a lot of people in one room as an enemy? Are you looking at that from a strategy perspective? There's a lot of people you could have taken out at once. So my mind kind of went there, and I thought, wow, that's troubling that's the leap that my mind made.
Yeah, in his manifesto, the shooter had said how he found all those weaknesses in security.
Yeah.
So he was pointing out the fact that he could check in ahead of time and bring the guns
Yeah.
in and do these things, and how little reinforcements there were at those
Yeah.
checkpoints. And that's why he was able to evade them. And yes, he ultimately got shot and caught. But at the same time, if all these things can be preventable, like, why aren't they doing
But
that?
why wasn't he killed? Like, I watched, like, you
Right.
had people with guns on him that
Yeah.
could have taken him out and didn't. And I mean, Wolf Blitz was standing right. I watched him yesterday on CNN. Was standing right next to him, got taken down. And, like, this gentleman could have been killed. I don't understand necessarily why it wasn't, if it was that big a threat, which makes, the conspiracy theorists pipe up and go,
Right.
was this a real threat?
Yeah, absolutely. When we return, a blunt shot at Canada from a prominent U.S. voice. It's raising eyebrows on both sides of the border.
Yes, I say no on the party line, so let's go.
This is a recent clip of a U.S. Senate hearing featuring their current Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, getting grilled on his recent comments about Canada. Have a look at the clip.
Canada has long been our largest share of foreign visitors, but last year we saw a 30% drop in Canadian tourism, largely due to the loss of trust and goodwill because of this administration's rhetoric around Canada. Secretary Lutnick, last week you said about Canada's economic strategy, and I quote, "They suck." I believe your spokesperson then said this was about Canada's economy leeching off of the U.S. How does insulting our closest ally and neighbor help the businesses in my state of New Hampshire and states all across this country who are hurting because of the loss of Canadian business and tourism?
I think it's, like, unbelievable that we have to identify that he's the current one. It's like, okay, but next week we'll have someone else. He's a current Secretary of War. He's the
Expendable.
current
Yeah.
Secretary of State, right?
Right.
Which shows you, there's reasons why when you hear the clip, what he actually said about it. So
Right. What happened to, like, people in these positions being prominent and being someone to look up to, or someone that's well spoken, and all of a sudden now we've just got people to say you suck?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
when did that become the threshold for political,
Yeah.
ambitions for people to be in these positions of power?
Well, and the fact that there actually is, when she talks about her state of New Hampshire, there's actual implications of these things. I was away last year and I was wearing my Canada stuff down south, and I had a gentleman from Kentucky come up to me and start just going at me, and about, and it was all rhetoric that had been in the press, and I asked him, I said, do you understand that almost a quarter of your exports from Kentucky come to the province of Ontario where I live? And he took a pause and stepped back, and then the next day he came to me and actually said, I thought, oh, he's coming up to me again, here we go. And he actually said, oh, you're right, I didn't realize how much it's going to
Right.
impact, and my family works in that business. And I thought, that's where these whole you suck things,
Mhm.
there's reality behind this. You can't just say, the alcohol stuff or whatever they're coming out with. And there's the fact that we had this where she had to actually chastise him at a hearing to say, like, why are you saying this about our allies?
Right.
Like,
We
what are
need
you
more
doing?
outspoken people like her. We need more senators, governors, everyone, or actually business leaders, because
Yes.
that's what it seems that will get through to Trump,
Yeah.
is the business community speaking and saying this is a problem.
Yeah.
And so we need allyship. We need to continue to have good communications and relations. And I feel like that's where Prime Minister Carney has worked really well with, like, Doug Ford or other premiers to say, continue to have those relationships across the border, because we need them. And at some point, it's going to come to the point where people realize the tariffs are really, like, hurting them as the American people a lot more, because job losses and the way that it will trickle down. Because, like you said, that political spin that they've gotten and they're so passionate about, right, their country, that that anger is misdirected
Yeah.
at us in the worst way possible right now.
But also, you suck isn't a strategy,
No.
right? Like,
No.
you suck. Well, you started it. Like,
Right.
it's an argument in the schoolyard. Like,
Yeah.
by actually coming out and saying they suck, their economy, they're leeches. Like, we do depend on their economy, but they depend on us too.
Yeah. We're
So-
getting to them. I feel like that's when you're getting to the bully, when all they can kind of sum up to
Is-
say is
yeah,
you suck, because
that's a
there's
fair point.
right. Like, what else can they say at
Right.
this juncture with us when they're
And
dealing
he may
with
be
us?
gone next week. We don't know either. But the
Right.
fact that he's repulsing so many people within his own party from the standpoint of, it's, why are you saying this today again?
Right.
Like, what's the grand plan? What are you trying to fix here? Are we trying to renegotiate CUSMA or USMCA or whatever, depending on who you want to call it?
Right.
that's not how you negotiate. And I realize, it's almost like the big bully, when all the little folks around the schoolyard all come together finally and say, like, hey, like, you got to knock this off, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
we're not giving you the power anymore. Now, because of the sheer size in their economy, they have the power, but you're trying to negotiate. And the fact that he's just making comments and has to be chastised at a hearing, this is a waste of government time, first of all. But I understand why it's being done.
Yeah. It really is one of those moments where I want to see more clips like that. I want to see more
Right.
committee meetings that way, where they're pushing them to say, hey, smarten up. Let's work on this together.
Right, but what's the win in that? He actually goes, yeah, you know what, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, but this is not a Hallmark movie,
Right.
right? This is not, the ending is more of a horror movie than it is a Hallmark movie. So having to actually chastise him is not going to do anything. And that's what he's been wound up to do. They've pulled the string and letting it go. So that's what the mandate he's been given, or he would have been fired already.
A long time ago. Well, let's hope next week is different, right? We'll discuss Joe Rogan's recent trip to the White House next, and how a text message that he sent put a new bill in motion.
I say no on the party line, so let's go.
Welcome back. This next clip raises more questions than answers. This is what happened after Joe Rogan sent the U.S. President Donald Trump a text.
I sent President Trump some information. We have a gigantic opiate problem in this country, obviously. In 2024, more than 80,000 people died of overdoses. It's a horrible number. And there's more than 5 million people that are addicted to opiates right now in this country. With one dose of Ibogaine, more than 80% of people are free of that addiction. With 2 doses, it's more than 90%. I sent him that information. The text message came back, sounds great. Do you want FDA approval? Let's do it. It was literally that quick. These drugs are illegal not because they're harmful. They're illegal because of the 1970 Controlled Substances Act that was passed by the Richard Nixon administration. They did it to target the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. It's not because these drugs harm people. And for 56 years, we've lived under those terrible conditions. We're free of that now. We're free of that now, thanks to all these people that we see next to me, and thanks to President Trump.
I honestly thought Joe Rogan was going to say ivermectin. I don't know why. In my head, when I was watching the clip, I thought back to COVID, and he's going to say ivermectin. He's going to say ivermectin.
I thought it's crazy that he's like, you want FDA approval,
Let's
like
go.
immediately. Like, let's not trust, the scientists or like the people that are subject matter experts or in their fields.
Yeah.
But like Joe Rogan says, let's do something, and he's like, sure, I'll make it happen.
Yeah, and I mean, he's doing it with cannabis right now. There's change of regulation. This happened this weekend regarding the medical side. And maybe there is room for change, but it should come from a policy perspective, not a text message
Right.
perspective. But in fairness to Joe Rogan, maybe that's the ball rolling. Maybe within the FDA, they review this going back. Because, I mean, the 70s were a long, long time ago. I know because I was born in the 70s. And policies change, things change, research changes, but maybe the direction hasn't changed that's been given to the FDA on this. So, let's see. Obviously, I don't disagree with him. You walk around any downtown Canada for the most part, and you're going to see an opioid crisis. You're going to see things that weren't acceptable, shouldn't be acceptable, aren't acceptable, and somehow are still happening without repercussions. So we have to do something. The conversations being had, it'll be hilarious if this actually is. Can you imagine if this is the solution?
Well,
if he's right?
I just think the optics just look so bad. Like, you're doing a presser, you're bringing him in just so that way he can say this is how it moved forward. So even if that was the case, why are you boasting about it? Like, how
Rogan
is
or
that?
Trump?
Both. I think both, because why would either think that was a good idea? Like, of course, for Joe Rogan, because
Rogan
he's
is
getting
speaking-
clicks and he's
Yeah.
on there. But for them just to say, sure, like, it just shows how lost that administration is. Like, that would have never have happened ever before in any other previous.
Right, but it isn't shocking, and it
presidencies.
isn't. The news isn't that he actually had the presser and the rest of it. The news is that Joe Rogan can give medical advice, and
Right.
it happens that quickly.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, it's not as mainstream as people think. This back in the day, you could say it would have been more mainstream. If anything comes out of it, that would be great. As far as the opioid crisis is an opioid crisis. That's no one's saying it's not.
Right.
it'd be, I just want to see what happens, that maybe there is. I'm not familiar with the drug he's proposing that was a banned substance and now is not, or he's proposing that they look at, and maybe it is a miracle thing, but we're going to use horse medicine during COVID as well. So.
I could see Joe Rogan having someone on his podcast, learning about it, educating people that way. Great. But not to say, I text the president and I told him this is how you move forward. And he's like, sure, let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Then he brings them up for a presser and tells everyone this is where it came from. Not maybe Joe said, talk to this scientist because this would be great. So that's the kind of like world we're living in right now.
Yeah. Oh, then
It's
on the
just such
president side, I
like a
agree with what you're
bizarre-
saying. The Rogan side, he does have experts that come in. He does do his due diligence on stuff. I mean, he thinks he can fix anything too, but maybe the information he's got is sound.
Right,
It's
but
just
why?
how
why
the
s-
process goes.
Yeah, where's the credibility
Yeah,
there? Why does that give him
It's
credibility?
one text message. We're doing a presser. Let's go. Let's get it legalized. I get that.
Right.
The Rogan perspective, I'd be interested to dig in more and see what actual homework he's done, because he does do his homework.
Right.
And I'm not someone who watches Rogan every day, but when he does have someone like that in, it is interesting to hear.
To utilize that platform, right?
Exactly.
In the best way possible. Well, today we went from Canada strong, making sure that our PM was saying we're focused on Canada and not US relations, but really those big topics right now are the trickle effect with our relationships with the US. So whether or not we're looking at pressers or we're looking at the press gallery assassinations, today was a big show and we had a lot to unpack. So we appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Party Lines on News Forum.